The diplomatic relationship between Russia and Moldova has hit a critical juncture as tensions have escalated to an unprecedented level. This is because the president, Maia Sandu, has made explosive allegations that Moscow is attempting to orchestrate a violent takeover of her government in a desperate bid to crush Moldova's hopes of joining the European Union. However, in a dangerous turn of events, the Kremlin is denying these allegations, fueling the political turmoil even further. Nestled between Romania and Ukraine, Moldova has been a geopolitical hotspot for years, as the West and Russia have jostled for influence in the region. However, the situation has become more precarious, following Russia's military incursion into Ukraine in February of last year. To make matters worse, the pro-Russian separatist movement in Moldova, backed by the Kremlin, has gained momentum, and nearly 1,500 Russian troops are currently stationed along the eastern border. As tensions mount, the stakes are higher than ever before, and now many wonder if Moldova will succumb to Russian pressure and abandon its aspirations of EU membership. Or will President Sandu manage to hold on to her government and keep the country on track towards the West? Welcome to Around the World, and today we'll be looking at how exactly Russia took down Moldova's pro-Western government. In one of the greatest shockers of the year so far, on February 13, 2023, President Sandu accused Russia of planning to overthrow Moldova's pro-European leadership using saboteurs disguised as anti-government protesters. This news hit the world with a bang as the world wondered her reason for making such a strong and direct allegation. However, that wasn't all, as Sandu warned that the saboteurs would try to overthrow the constitutional order and replace the legitimate power of Chisinau with an illegitimate one. Following this, Sandu went ahead and declared that the Kremlin's attempt to bring violence to Moldova would not succeed. And in an even crazier turn of events, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky recently told a European Union summit that Kyiv had intercepted the plan for the destruction of Moldova by Russian intelligence. But what or who is Moldova, and why the sudden Russian interest in attacking it? Well, Moldova is a country neighboring Romania and Ukraine with a population of 2.6 million that just recently received EU candidate status in the summer of 2022. Because of this candidate status, Russian troops in Moldova's breakaway region of Transnistria have opposed the idea of former Soviet republics joining the EU, and as such, the situation is extremely dicey. The threat of an attack from the Russians was so feared that Moldova temporarily closed its airspace, and Romania scrambled military jets after strange balloon-like objects were spotted in the sky. The incidents happened at noon local time, and both countries were unsure of the origin of the objects. This was a legitimate concern, as it occurred shortly after a similar incident in the United States earlier this month, which involved a Chinese weather balloon that had strayed off course. Because of the war in Ukraine, which is still going on, Moldova is worried about its safety, as Russian missile fragments have even landed on its territory. And to make matters even worse, according to Kyiv's military chief, recently, cruise missiles flew over Moldova and Romania before landing in Ukraine, which also now contributes to the tension as the country fears aggression from the Kremlin. But how exactly have the Russians responded to these allegations? Well, despite the strong allegation and supposed evidence, Russia dismissed the accusations of plotting to overthrow Moldova's pro-European leadership with the help of saboteurs as completely unfounded. The Russian Foreign Ministry stated that such claims were unsubstantiated and accused Ukraine of trying to drive a wedge between Moldova and Russia. They also took offense in the claims as they charged Moldovan officials with harboring Russophobic sentiments. Unlike Western countries and Ukraine, Russia asserts that it does not interfere in the internal affairs of other countries. As the Foreign Ministry claimed that Russia did not pose a threat to Moldova's security, and emphasized the benefits of maintaining stable and friendly relations. It is important to note, though, that for years, the Kremlin has tried to keep former Soviet states, including Ukraine and Moldova, under its influence. However, both countries have now shifted their focus toward the West. However, despite the fact that the Russians disputed the allegations still had the rest of the world talking, as even the United States spoke up about the threat. In a response to Sandu's allegations, the U.S. expressed its support for Moldova's sovereignty and inadvertently chose a side in this debacle. State Department spokesman Ned Price told reporters in Washington that they were deeply concerned about reports of Russia's plot to destabilize Moldova's democratically elected government. Price went on to say that Russia has always been a bad influence in Moldova and the areas around it. So, the U.S. has been working closely with Moldova to improve its political stability and fight against Russia's long-term plans to weaken the country's democratic institutions. Many feel the intervention of the USA is unnecessarily dangerous and could also ignite the flames of war in the region, but some also believe that it is necessary to quench the flames of war in the region. As such, it is anyone's guess who is right. But what does war between the Russians and Moldovans mean for the region? A war between Russia and Moldova could have big effects on the area. As Moldova is a small country that shares borders with Ukraine and Romania, so any conflict could spread to these countries. Not to mention that the war between Russia and Ukraine is still going on, and a new war could make the area even more unstable than we could ever imagine. It is quite possible the Ukrainians and the Moldovans could come together as a united front and face the Kremlin, or in a complete turn of events, the Kremlin could find itself in a war against two separate fronts. This is ultimately bad for Russia, as it would stretch its military supply, its economy, and its resources far beyond what the country might be able to handle. Speaking of the economy, a war between Russia and Moldova could have big effects on the economies of both countries and the rest of the world. Moldova has a relatively small economy and is heavily dependent on remittances from migrant workers and agricultural exports. As such, a conflict could severely disrupt these economic activities and lead to significant economic losses for the country. A conflict could also have economic costs for Russia, especially if it leads to international sanctions and economic isolation. This could make the country's economy even worse than it already is, making things even harder for its people. The impact of a conflict in Moldova could also be felt more broadly in the region and beyond, as trade and economic activity could be disrupted, which could hurt neighboring countries like Ukraine and Romania. It could also make the whole region less stable, which could hurt energy supplies and transportation routes. Also, a conflict in Moldova could have geopolitical effects, which could change the way countries interact with each other and the balance of power. This could have significant and far-reaching consequences for the global economy and international security. Sadly, the fact that Russian troops are in the breakaway region of Transnistria in Moldova makes things even more complicated, as the conflict could get worse and draw in more people from the area, leading to a bigger fight. The whole world would be drawn into the war in Moldova, which could have wider geopolitical effects since Russia and the West have both been interested in the country. Any conflict could change the balance of power in the area and have repercussions for the rest of the world at large. Luckily, there is no immediate threat of war between Russia and Moldova at present, but the situation in the area is still tense because of ongoing geopolitical tensions between Russia and the West and political disagreements within Moldova. And sadly, recent claims by Moldovan President Sandu that Russia is planning to use saboteurs dressed as anti-government protesters to violently overthrow the country's pro-European government have made things even worse between the two countries. It's important to remember that the situation is unpredictable, and there is always a chance of making a mistake or making things worse, especially when geopolitical tensions are already high. However, at present, there are no indications that a full-scale war is imminent. But what do you think? Are we on the verge of a Russia-Moldova war, or is the future safe and the two countries will find an impasse for their aggression? Let us know in the comments section below, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe if you enjoyed it. And while you're here, why not check out this video? Until next time, bye.